We are coming to you live from the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you can handle the truth. Good evening from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen. Tonight, we welcome Richard Lighthouse with an update on D.C. on TM Radio. Our newsletter is free, unlike so many other things, and you can receive a copy every Sunday by writing Frank at targetedmassachusetts.org. In the subject line, type newsletter or visit our site at targetedmassachusetts.org. And in the navigation, go to contact information. Please fill in your name, email address, cell phone number, and a short message. Or you can call me in the U.S. at 1-508-857-8334. You can call into the station and ask a question at 800-313-9443, or you can listen at 605-313-0163. And now for an update on Washington, D.C., we welcome our very distinguished guest, Richard Lighthouse. Go ahead, Richard.
That introduction. I wanted to dive right in and give a little bit of background, because I get questions along these lines all the time, and there's a long and colorful history that leads up to the Targeted Individual Program and a lot of events that kind of connect the dots. And the information I'm giving tonight is to the best of my knowledge and the best of the credible information that I've been able to research. I cannot promise that some of it has not been distorted or deliberately altered in the records, but I will encourage folks to do their own research along these lines. There's a lot of credible sources out there and authors that have really dug into the details to find out who did what and when. So really, the story has a history that goes back at least 100 years. I'm going to dive in right around the financial panic of 1907, and I'll explain why this is related to the TI program. The Rothschilds were a very wealthy family, and there's a long history. I won't try to dig in that tonight, but they were involved by having J.P. Morgan, who many people have heard of, was actually partially self-made, but he was a lieutenant for the Rothschild family and did a lot of their errands and did a lot of their legwork, particularly in the United States. Around 1907, 1908, there was a financial panic that was causing bankers around the world lots of problems. They didn't like the unpredictability, and they decided that what was needed was a central bank in the United States that would minimize these vicious cycles that were not helpful to sort of a stable growth element in the banking sector. So a number of folks got together, including J.P. Morgan, Senator, some other banking folks, and they met on an island called Jekyll Island in Georgia in 1910 for what's known as a very famous duck hunt. And it was the result of this meeting that they put together a structure or framework to set up the Federal Reserve. And the senator that was involved, I don't recall his name off the top of my head, but he was well connected with these banking folks. And he was kind of the go-between with President Woodrow Wilson. And a few years later, Woodrow Wilson ended up signing basically signing away. And you can read his quotes on this. It was something to the effect of "I have unwittingly ruined my country." He didn't realize what he had done until afterwards, and understood the full repercussions of the agreement that he signed. Woodrow Wilson, when he was in office, found himself about $450 million in debt, which 100 years ago was a great deal of money. And it was a larger debt than the United States had ever run up. And the way he found out of it is the Rothschilds and a few go-betweens offered to pay off the debt, and in return, Woodrow Wilson agreed to sign a piece of paper that set up the Federal Reserve for the United States as being a central bank. Unfortunately, it was a Ponzi type scheme, and I may be butchering this story a little bit, and there may be some folks that want to correct some details, and that's fine. But I encourage you to, if you want to read these details, to there's a number of good authors out there that dig into these details. But the gist of it is this: when the United States needs money, they go to the U.S. Treasury, and this is after the signing of this agreement. The Federal Reserve then authorizes the Treasury to print money. For example, if the Treasury needs to print $100, that money is printed, and a debt is then automatically owed to the Federal Reserve for $100, as though the Federal Reserve had loaned the United States $100. And in fact, that money was created out of thin air. It's very important that you understand what a Ponzi scheme this is. And that system exists today. The Federal Reserve Bank, in my opinion, is a fraud. And there have been many people that have stated this, including former Congressman Ron Paul, who's a very strong advocate for auditing the Fed. But when the U.S. Treasury prints money, it automatically becomes a debt that is owed to the Federal Reserve, although they did not lend us a single dime. And then now the United States taxpayers are obligated to repay this fictional debt. It is a giant Ponzi scheme, and it is a fraud. I encourage you to look this up. It's very disturbing when you find out how crooked the system is. And it's done at the highest levels. The way the agreement reads, it says all we have to do as the U.S. government is pay back the $450 million, and the whole thing goes away. And every time a senator or congressman has tried to put forth a bill in Congress to pay off this amount and clear out the agreement, it has been viciously fought. They've been threatened. They've had their lives threatened, their families threatened to not do this. So there's a very long and colorful history that goes with this. Now, to justify this debt or to raise money to pay this fictional debt, the IRS was set up. And I encourage you to also look this up as well. One of the best resources I have found is a man named Aaron Rousseau. Aaron Rousseau was a friend of the Rockefeller family. In fact, he was very good friends with one of them, Nicholas Rockefeller. And incidentally, Nicholas Rockefeller, 11 months before 9/11 happened, Nicholas Rockefeller told Aaron Rousseau that 9/11 was going to happen. Very important. You can see that on interviews on YouTube, where Aaron Rousseau describes how he was told by Nicholas Rockefeller that an event that would be catastrophic would be happening 11 months into the future, and that it would result in wars in the Middle East where the United States would invade. He told them almost a year in advance of 9/11. So that strongly suggests that the Rockefeller family was involved and had full knowledge of 9/11 before it happened. So I encourage you to look up his videos. Aaron Rousseau was also a strong advocate for doing away with the IRS. He strongly believed that it was illegitimate, that it was tied to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is not federal, and there are no reserves. It is a private bank. It has nothing to do with the U.S. government, but it is a giant Ponzi scheme, and the taxpayers of the United States are being milked. just as the central banks in most of the countries around the world. The central banks are a fraud and a scam. And these wealthy globalists, including the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, are involved in these Ponzi schemes. This is the fundamental basis, the power and the wealth that is behind the corruption in the CIA, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the targeted individual program. This is the power and the wealth that is behind it. And it didn't just come up recently. It didn't come up just 30 years ago. This has been building over more than 100 years. Okay? It's very important that TIs understand this so that they don't think that this is something magical. It didn't just pop up instantly. It's been there all along. People have been writing about this, stating that this corruption is very serious. Through history, there have been many people that have commented about. Henry Ford, the great automotive genius in Detroit, talked about it and was very sensitive to the subject and was very aware that there was this good old boy network that was involved with Wall Street and the central bank, and they didn't have any problem pulling punches with him when he needed to take out loans for Ford Motor Company. So he was well aware of the power plays that happened in the background, and they personally affected his business dealings. So I encourage you. I've published a book with a lot of the quotes that is free that you can look up. It's on the homepage of targetedjustice.com. If you'll go down to the very bottom of the homepage, you'll see about 30 ebooks. One of them is called Abolish the Fed. And in there, I've compiled a bunch of quotes from very famous people, including Henry Ford, Thomas Jefferson, all regarding private banking and why they think that private banking is so corrupt. And it comes down to the modern day. Barry Goldwater, the senator from Hawaii, who in his farewell speech said that there is a shadow government, and he tried to allude to it without getting in trouble. So I've compiled a bunch of those quotes, and you can find them with a brief history of the Federal Reserve in that book. And I think it'd be a helpful introductory primer for most folks. I've also provided some references that can get you to other material as well if you want to get into more depth. So I think that could be helpful. I'll give you some examples of just how connected the Council on Foreign Relations is with the Federal Reserve. So you understand that this wealth that is not part of the U.S. government, although on their website they try to claim that you need a Freedom of Information Act request to get information from them, as though they were a government agency. They are not a government agency. They try to claim national security over certain issues. They try to claim certain types of information are beyond exposure. So they want their cake and eat it too, basically. But here's some examples some recent examples of where the Federal Reserve is connected to the Council on Foreign Relations. The current chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And you can go to CFR.org and look up these people. They are listed on the membership roll there at the Council on Foreign Relations, where there's about 5,000 names that are listed as members of the CFR. Vice Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Richard Clarida, he is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Janet Yellen, the former chairman who recently stepped down, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Alan Greenspan, you've heard of him. He was former chairman. He is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Prior to him was Paul Volcker, chairman. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. You see where there's strong connections between banking, large private sector banking, and the Council on Foreign Relations. That's where their interests lie. That's where their money lies. When we pay taxes to the IRS, and I encourage anyone to try this, write a check to the IRS for $1, and when the check clears the bank, look at what is stamped on the back of the check. it'll say that it cleared to the Federal Reserve, your local Federal Reserve. If you're near Chicago, it'll say Federal Reserve of Chicago. So when you make a payment to the IRS, it gets transferred to the Federal Reserve. Your money that you're paying for taxes does not pay taxes, does not benefit the U.S. Treasury. It goes to a private bank that is privately owned, that the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds have a huge controlling interest in. The New York Federal Reserve is more than 50% controlled by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. The reason that's important is because that's the largest Federal Reserve, and all the Wall Street transactions that are billions of dollars every day clear through the Federal Reserve of New York. So that's incredibly important. That's where all the money flows. These central banks do transactions and dealings all over the globe. It's an international system of checks and balances and clearances that's all tightly controlled, and you've got to be in the club or you can't access those monies and you can't transact with those monies. So it's a corrupt system, but it's also the basis of the power and the wealth that is behind the corruption in the CIA and the corruption that leads to the targeted individual program. I mentioned Ron Paul, former Congressman Ron Paul. I'm a huge fan of Ron Paul, by the way. I mention him regularly. He has been pushing for years to audit the Federal Reserve because that would expose just what a bag of lies the Federal Reserve and the IRS system is. It's entirely crooked and corrupt. Aaron Rousseau, who I mentioned before, goes on at length in his videos encouraging people to come forward and show the law that was passed that requires you to pay income tax. And in fact, there isn't one. This is a real shock for most people. There is no law that requires you, that was been passed by Congress, that requires you to pay income tax.
That's right. It was never ratified.
It was, and the U.S. Constitution says that if a tax is levied on the people, it must be, I forget the exact word, equanimous or something like that, so that each person has to pay the same amount. And that's clearly not the system that we have, and it contradicts what's in the Constitution. That has been brought up many times in courtrooms. The IRS, incidentally, has their own courtroom. So when you try to take the IRS to court, or they want to take you to court, you don't get to see a regular judge. You have to see an IRS judge who is beholden to, guess who? The Federal Reserve and the corrupt banking group. So that if you go to court over an IRS issue, the deck is stacked against you, unfortunately. That's the system that we have to deal with. So I cannot overstate what a mass of corruption this is. And unfortunately, President Woodrow Wilson got us into this mess more than 100 years ago. It's a fascinating story. I wish there was an easy way out. There's a lot of congressmen and senators that have tried to pass bills every year to shut down this crooked system without getting in trouble themselves.
Okay, Richard, we have to go to commercial. Thank you so much for listening.
Folks, we're living in a world the likes of which we've never perceived any clearer than we do now. The plan for global governance has been in the works for generations and would have likely been achieved by now but for the fact that the globalists left open their Achilles heel. With all their tools, Federal Reserve System, fiat currency, no child left behind, and then Common Core education introduced to our schools to dumb us down, vaccines, pharmaceuticals to lobotomize us, GMO foods, insertion of compromised or bought and paid for politicians, judges, mainstream media propaganda, all pieced together like a puzzle designed to ultimately bring the world under submission. But with all their strategy, they forgot one thing: knowledge. And knowledge is power. With knowledge, their bombardment is nullified. Folks, with that, as brilliant and knowledgeable as you've become, among the wisest audience of any radio audience in the world, and you are, I want you to take a moment to reflect and ask yourself, how much of that knowledge did I obtain from Republic Broadcasting Network? How high has my consciousness been raised since I've been a listener? How fast am I now able to discriminate truth from fake news by being a Republic Broadcasting listener? How clear am I now able to see the world since I've been listening to RBN? Ask yourselves those questions, folks. Then ask yourself, what is that knowledge worth to me? Like my morning coffee, how would I survive without it? A voice of truth in a sea of lies. Do we not all need to make sure it survives? Like public broadcasting, we are now finding we can only survive with listener support. Censorship, advertisers being attacked, truth itself being attacked. It's the only way through this. We at Republic Broadcasting humbly ask you to become a supporter. Look at your budget and make a determination of what Republic Broadcasting is worth to you and what you can afford on a monthly basis. Go to republicbroadcasting.org and pledge 20, 30, 40, 50, if possible, 100 a month or more if it's affordable. Click the donate button and become a regular monthly donor. Assure both us and yourself that Republic Broadcasting truth will continue to flow like that morning coffee. The network thanks you.
Don't regret growing old. It's a privilege denied to many. Heart disease is taking our youth from us. Young people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond are dying needlessly. One of the hardest messages I've ever had to deliver is to convince people that something natural like Extendivite should be taken as a preventative measure. I'm sure you heard an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Extendivite is that ounce. Take Extendivite for 1 year and see what your doctor has to say and how much better you feel. Herbs take time to address the problem. It took years of life to have a problem. Give Extendivite 1 year to fix the problem. Don't wait until it's too late. Call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or visit us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Good evening from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen. Tonight, we welcome Richard Lighthouse with an update on Washington, D.C. on TM Radio. In view of the time element, Richard, we're going to go right to you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Frank. I wanted to add some quotes because I think these are very telling. The first time I came across this information regarding the Federal Reserve, I was very skeptical. I just couldn't believe that this level of corruption could be swept under the carpet year after year after year, and that congressmen and senators didn't have the guts to stand up to it and shut this crooked system down. And I'm not sure I can explain the reasons why that hasn't happened. I'm sure there are senators and congressmen that have tried to do something about it. At some point, though, a lot of them buy into the system, get paid off, and get patted on the back, and they stay in Congress for term after term after term. The problem with private banks is their incentives are different than what a government's incentives are. The government wants to as Thomas Jefferson said, the pursuit of happiness, which means wealth and prosperity for all. But for a private bank, they're not interested in wealth and prosperity for all. They have their private interests that exceed the interests of others. So I do feel like at some point, private banks will be, all private banks will be shut down, and only governments will be allowed to run banks. I hope that happens in the future. I hope that we're able to shut down the Federal Reserve and confiscate the illegal gotten gains, just like the police do during a drug bust. If you've got drug money in your car and your car was used in drug deals, then they confiscate the car and they confiscate the money. And the same thing should happen, in my opinion, to the wealth of the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the other globalists that have been involved. Here's a brief list of, and I I wouldn't be repeating this if I didn't think it was accurate. So here are the private companies that own the Federal Reserve in the United States. The Rothschild Bank of London, the Warburg Bank of Hamburg, the Rothschild Bank of Berlin, the Lehman Brothers of New York, the Lazard Brothers of Paris, Kuhn Loeb Bank of New York, Israel Moses Seif Banks of Italy, Goldman Sachs of New York, Warburg Bank of Amsterdam, and the Chase Manhattan Bank of New York. That's the Rockefellers. So these private banks are the owners of the Federal Reserve. It has nothing to do with the U.S. government. It's a private bank. Let me give you a couple of quotes. This first one is from Thomas Jefferson, but he was very aware of the risk of having private banks enter the new United States that was forming. I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. That's Thomas Jefferson. He was highly opposed to the private banks. Henry Ford. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, or if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. That's Henry Ford. That's a very bold statement by Henry Ford. Mayor Rothschild, who was a very wealthy man in the early 1800s, had far more money than the royalty of England. He basically controlled the money supply of Great Britain, and he bragged about it. He had that much wealth. He had far more wealth than the King or Queen of England. Here's a famous quote from him: "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws." That's how much wealth he has, when he doesn't care who's making the laws, because he will subvert them, divert them, and control them through any illegal means possible. So he really doesn't care who sits on the throne, and he doesn't care who makes the laws. He will use monetary power to get what he wants. Not a very positive statement about this person. But Senator Barry Goldwater, who at one time ran for president, here's a quote from him, and I guess this dates to about 1970 or so. "Most Americans have no real understanding of the operation of international moneylenders. The accounts of the Federal Reserve System have never been audited. It operates outside the control of Congress and manipulates the credit of the United States." So again, that's Senator Barry Goldwater. And there was a court ruling that made it official. So we've got all these unofficial statements from important people, including senators and congressmen, but there was actually a court ruling in 1982. The regional Federal Reserve banks are not government agencies.
Richard, we have to go to commercial once again.
Okay.
We'll be back in 3 minutes. Thank you all for listening.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
How healthy are your arteries? Deteriorating circulation has a number of early warning signs. High cholesterol, high blood pressure, fingers and or toes often go cold, arms and or legs often go to sleep, sharp diagonal crease in the earlobe, short walks cause cramping or pains in legs, memory is not as good as it used to be, ankles swell late in the day, chest pain after physical exercise or emotional stress. If you experience even one of these symptoms, your circulatory system is crying out for attention. Extendivite is a natural solution to help improve your overall health. Extendivite is not your average heart tonic. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or find us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Tired of being lied to by mass media? It's growing more and more apparent today that news is received less and less through standard media outlets. Even with a growing audience every day, RBN is beginning to direct more efforts into social media. Social media and the use of the internet is fast becoming the primary source of people for news, regardless of demographic. RBN has set out to provide some of the best news on the internet through republicbroadcasting.org and also has begun to use the tools to our advantage by way of social media. Republic Broadcasting is now operating a Facebook page to function as yet another avenue to have our collective voice reach new audiences across not only America, but across the globe as well. The Facebook page features not only news, but also an RBN player to listen to our broadcast. Get involved by visiting facebook.com/Republic Broadcasting and liking our page and share it with your friends and family, because you can handle the truth.
Good evening from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen. Tonight, we welcome Richard Lighthouse with an update on Washington, D.C. on TM Radio. Go ahead, Rich.
Thank you, Frank. I probably skipped over the D.C. update, and I will do that again. I apologize. So, quick update on the Washington, D.C. protest. We have updated our information on the website at targetedjustice.com. If you go to the second tab there, it's called Targeted Protest. We've updated some of the diagrams and information on hotels and travel arrangements. We've got a few suggestions for you. There are certainly other options if you want to do a little research on your own. So the way you're handling the program, we've got a program outline that's been posted. We have very deliberately not provided specific details on locations as yet, although we are fully aware of all of those options. So our plan is to minimize the potential for disruption by those folks in Washington that would be so inclined to disrupt. Our thinking is the less prep time we give them, the more likely that we can have a smooth program. So when you arrive on Saturday at what we call location number 1, there's a map there that shows close to the White House where we are planning to meet and rally, and that will be kind of our kickoff rally, and we will be handing out programs and information, and we'll keep you thoroughly updated. If you've purchased a registration and a T-shirt, we will hand out T-shirts at that time. So stay tuned. I am aware there's questions and concerns there. We're trying to balance those concerns with our desire to have a smooth program with minimal disruptions. So we are not expecting any problems. We're simply taking steps that we feel like will help ensure a smooth program. So we appreciate your comments and questions. If you've got specific questions, you can get them to us at targetedjusticemembership@protonmail.com. So we're looking forward to have a great rally and great protests. We're going to have flyers, we're going to have big banners, and it's going to be a very productive event. So if you have not signed up yet, there's still plenty of time to register. You can get your check in to Targeted Justice, P.O. Box 6655, Peoria, Arizona, 85385, and we will get you signed up. So we look forward to seeing everyone in Washington, D.C. If you're planning to visit your congressman, you want to go ahead and register online. We've got a link that will take you to your congressman and senator's website, and you can request an appointment time through them. So if you get you will likely be asked, what is the conversation about? We suggest that you simply stick to civil rights, that you are working with a civil rights group and you would like to discuss civil rights issues with them. So they may not let you speak with a congressman. They may suggest that you speak with, we found that most congressmen have a civil rights director or an administrator level person that's at the director level that will speak to you on behalf of the congressman. So that's almost as good as speaking to the congressman himself. We have found that they do bring up that information in a weekly meeting and a weekly staff meeting. So if we leave a package of information, they will look at it, and it will be minimally discussed in a weekly staff meeting. So there is the potential for progress there, and we encourage you to do that. Everyone should go and try to visit their congressman. If you haven't done that already, we encourage you to sign up and make an appointment, or at least try. You can't guarantee that they're always available, but you're likely not to get an appointment if you don't ask. So ask for an appointment on Monday or Tuesday. That would be October the 21st or 20th and 21st. Or if you want to stick around through Wednesday, you could also do it then as well. So again, any questions? Targeted Justice Membership at protonmail.com. So thank you. We look forward to seeing you there. Let me move back over to a discussion we're discussing the Federal Reserve, the wealthy global elite families, the Council on Foreign Relations, and how all these dots are connected that led up to a power base that works with the CIA and has formed the deep state and the shadow government here in the United States. So it's a big topic and certainly not one that you could thoroughly cover in an hour. I'm simply trying to give some of the folks an introduction, and I encourage you to do your own research. If some of my information I'm presenting is in error, I apologize. I'm using the best credible sources that I've been able to find and to connect those dots. So I appreciate your patience, and again, I encourage you to do your own research. Something I wanted to cover is back in 2016, when I was doing my own research, I wanted answers for who was behind the TI program. I was asking those same questions that you're asking. And I was quite certain that some of these folks at the Council on Foreign Relations were involved. And I want to know how they involved, where their money was, how they were connected to the central bank. What I found was I started doing searches on stock markets to see if there was something that should show up. And I inadvertently stumbled on what I believe to be the basic asset holdings of the Rockefeller and Rothschild's families. For those that don't know, the Rockefellers and the Rothschild families are married together. So, and in fact, many of these wealthy families have married together over many generations. So it's difficult to draw a distinct line and say this group of assets belongs to the Rockefellers or this group belongs to the Warburgs. They are wealthy families for many generations that have married together for their own purposes, in the same way that kings and courts did for centuries. But what I found was on Yahoo Finance, which is certainly not the go-to website for wealthy globalists that have depended on the Wall Street Journal and Barron's and Investors Business Daily and the London Stock Exchange for their quotes. They would know well-entrenched folks that deal with large resources and large assets. They would never think to go to Yahoo Finance. Well, what I found was Yahoo, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, was making stock quotes on global markets. No, you don't have to have permission to do that. They just decided to do that. They had the resources to do this, and they were making quotes. And the way they did this was very straightforward. We're going to go to each of these stock exchanges, like the New York Stock Exchange, the London Exchange, the Mexico City Exchange, and we're going to pick a stock like Apple Computer. And we're going to say how many shares of Apple Computer were sold on the Mexico City Stock Exchange. And then we're going to multiply that times the share price, and we're going to find out what the market capitalization is on this stock market for Apple Computer. And what you find is each one of these stock markets have sold the same stock. That's very much what it appears to have happened. And they've accumulated mass reserves, massive assets under each one of these umbrella companies. For example, Lloyd's Banking Group, a company founded in 1995, is probably the largest corporation in the world. It is on the London Stock Exchange. According to Yahoo Finance, between 2016 and 2017, I have multiple quotes showing it has a market capitalization that exceeds, this number is going to blow your mind, $2.4 quadrillion. That's in U.S. dollars. That is the wealth and the assets of one bank on the London Stock Exchange. To give you a reference of how much wealth that is more than 1,000 times the value of the entire New York Stock Exchange and all the companies on it. That massive value is held in one company on one stock exchange in London. And that money and that wealth is hidden by hiding the number of shares that are held and traded. That's the corruption that's going on. This is how, in my opinion, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds have hidden their assets. They've collected them through the central banks all over the world, and they funneled them into these companies, and they're hiding the value by only presenting a limited number of the shares, even though far more shares are actually owned and traded by the company. So, if you're interested in seeing those screenshots, I have the screenshots from Yahoo Finance from 2016 and 2017. So it went on for a very long time. And interestingly, after I published the first book, within a few months, Verizon Company, oddly, a cell phone company, came in and bought Yahoo operations for almost $5 billion and immediately zeroed out all of these values and made them look just like the Wall Street Journal, the stock quotes of the Wall Street Journal. I thought that was very telling, and I documented that, and I published a number of books on it showing this is clearly where these wealthy families are hiding their wealth. Some other examples. Toyota Motor Corporation, listed on the London Stock Exchange. This is a Japanese company that is listed on the London Stock Exchange. Its total market cap is $1.8 quadrillion. That's mind-boggling. Toyota Motor Corporation sells about 10 million vehicles a year, almost the same number as Volkswagen. Volkswagen Corporation in Germany has a market cap of about $60 billion. Toyota Motor Corporation has a value 10,000 times greater than the Volkswagen Corporation. Does that make sense? I've had this discussion with a Rice University professor who's a friend of mine, and he taught economics for more than 30 years. And I showed him this, and he was absolutely floored.
Richard?
He said, yes.
This company has these great cash reserves. What's to prevent them from just buying Apple computers outright?
Nothing. When you have that much money, it's a number that's so mind-boggling large. You can do anything. The amount of money held in this one company, Lloyd's Banking Group, and don't confuse that with Lloyd's of London, the insurance company. That's a completely different company. This is Lloyd's Banking Group that was founded in 1995. That's recent history. And this company has a market valuation 1,000 times greater than the New York Stock Exchange. Where did that wealth come from? That is phenomenal. That's enough money to give every man, woman, and child in the entire world $300,000.
That's incredible.
It's mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling how much money that is. And it's in one company.
Thank God for most companies that reserve some stock and actually hold 51% of the stock. Any of the others that fall short of that, they're going to get chopped up. They have the ability to buy them up, threaten them, acquire them, whatever they want to do. When you have that much wealth, really there are no limitations to what you can do. And with that amount of money, anybody can be bought or sold. It sounds like 1929 only worldwide.
And you could say that in a sense. You could say that, but it's not. The surprising part is it's even bigger. I did a lot of reading around a gentleman named Benjamin Fulford, who runs a video channel on YouTube and has for a number of years. He's actually, I don't agree with a lot of things he's doing and saying. However, he is clearly an insider in the business world in Japan. He has interviewed many of the CEOs of major corporations in Japan, including Toyota, Nissan, Mitsubishi. Very familiar, knows them on a first-name basis. He has even interviewed David Rockefeller, knowing full well what was going on in Japan. In Fulford's opinion, he states that it is common knowledge among corporate CEOs and banks in Japan, David Rockefeller not only controls and not only runs the government of Japan, but controls every major corporation. He runs it like his own personal fiefdom. This is common knowledge in Japan. And the really surprising part is the Japanese businessmen thought that the same situation was true in the United States. And they were surprised to learn that the Rockefellers did not control every corporation in the United States. So there is a very between government and business and corporations in Japan, there's a revolving door. And that's very deliberate. The Rockefeller families, particularly David Rockefeller, set it up that way, apparently, very deliberately, so that the government does things that's good for corporations and vice versa. And it's in the mind of Benjamin Fulford, David Rockefeller runs Japan like his own personal fiefdom. So I'm not asking anyone to take my word for it or Benjamin Fulford's word. I encourage you to do your own research. But what you find is a number of these companies on the London Stock Exchange are all Japanese. And they're all connected to David Rockefeller and the Rockefeller Foundation. That cannot be a coincidence. Toyota Motor Corporation, All Nippon Airways, Mitsubishi Electronics, Barovia, Ricoh, the camera company, Konami, the game-making company. These are all Japanese companies, and their stock is primarily traded on the London Stock Exchange. This can't be a coincidence.
We have a caller, Chris from Las Vegas.
Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening. Good evening, Frank.
Hi, how you doing, Chris?
Very well. I'm not sure who your guest is, but he's very, very knowledgeable, and I happen to know that he's exactly correct on the information he's providing you. Here probably 6-7 years ago, I was, let's call just surfing around the net. I'm not a very savvy technological guy, but I was looking up some things that I had heard about and thought I would see if I could locate them, and I came across what's termed the Depository Thrift Credit Corporation, Depository Trust Corp., Mutual Securities Corp., and Government Securities Corp. And I was able to do some public access on the Depository Thrift Credit Corporation at that time and discovered that they had claimed on deposit at that time $36 quadrillion. And it's my contention that probably now there are probably well over 50 quadrillion. And I think that the others who have been chiseling off minute amounts, but it's amounted to an astronomical amount of money, monies that have been stolen from the world's global economies that have been placed in these depository thrift, depository trust corp, and other government securities corporations, foundations, and hidden away from the world's people so that these sycophants and these global gangsters can amass the wealth that he's talking about with Toyota Corp and control the governments and corporations of the complete oligarchical world cabal of criminals that run the planet. I'm curious what your guest thinks.
I'm probably not familiar at your level of detail with these securities companies, but they do appear to be a pseudo private/government partnership similar to the IMF or the World Bank that deals in sort of political funds, back-scratching funds for political favors, both at the state level here in the United States, but also globally and internationally. So that is certainly part of the favors that go into the political deals that are cut. And so the IMF is certainly one of the most politicized organizations that is supposed to be a bank and supposed to be doing good around the world, but it ends up being incentives for corruption, in my opinion. But I think you're on the right track there.
I certainly agree with you, and it's been my contention, and let's say I have some extraterrestrial attachments and have been gifted some knowledge and access. It's my discerned opinion that Switzerland, as we're told it's called, is actually Schweizerland, and this is where the global banking central of operations is centered. And this is the Rothschild Rockefeller, which I think are just two sticks, much like Jacob and Isaac from the beginning of the biblical days. They have different monikers, but I think they're all the same family line of global banking gangsters who control the world. But this is just Chris, targeted in Las Vegas, and this is part of the information. I'm sure that the reason they've tried to completely obliterate me twice and destroyed my family and everything else I have in an attempt to mind control me or shut me up and silence me from blowing the whistle as loud as I can, much like you're doing. So bless you for your investigative research and carry on. Thank you, Frank. Have a great evening, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Good night, Chris. Yeah, Chris is very informative himself, and he's a welcome caller all the time, and he brings a lot with him to the table, and he really thinks a lot of your knowledge as well. But we're getting close. We've got about 2.5 minutes left, so go ahead.
Okay, I was going to see if we had any other questions or callers coming in.
No, I don't see anything on the board.
Okay, all right. For folks that are interested, I encourage you to look up some of these companies. Again, they're Japanese companies, but they're traded on the London Stock Exchange. I found that it appears that the two most corrupt exchanges globally, from what I could gather, are the London Stock Exchange and the Mexico City Exchange. It seems that for whatever reasons, perhaps it's the SEC that prevents the gross level of corruption that appears to be happening in London and Mexico City. But the Rothschilds and Rockefellers would have to own and control the stock exchange itself to be getting away with miscounting the numbers of outstanding shares, which is the way that they're hiding this value. So they'll show a market capitalization, for example, in the Wall Street Journal, that's a very reasonable middle of the market kind of number that shows, it's an average bank in London. And the reason they can put off that air is they're not telling you the total number of shares that are outstanding. I even found instances where they wouldn't even provide the quote. Lloyd's Banking Group, for example, has at least 8 different fund names that it's traded under. They go into the trading symbol LLD, and they actually have multiple trading symbols, LLD1, LLD2, all the way up to LLD8, and each one of those ticker symbols has a value of around $800 trillion that I could determine. So it's a mind-boggling amount of money, and the corruption goes beyond anything. This makes the Enron scandal look like pocket change.
Okay, Richard, we have to say goodnight. And thank you very much for your appearance. And good night from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen.
The reviews for Extendivite are amazing. Here are some from Amazon. By Christine, great for heart palpitations. By Ann, before I started using this product, every afternoon my ankles and my hands would be swollen. That doesn't happen anymore. So if that part of their advertising is true, I have to assume that the rest of it is also. Not to mention that when I had my yearly blood test, only a few weeks after beginning to use this product, my cholesterol had dropped over 30 points. I'm going to continue to take it. By Croc, I love this product. It really works. By Brad, works great, thank you. Tell us your story. Get your Extendivite today. To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
This is RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.